as large as the American Revolution, but just not as well intentioned or something like that. I don't know. Or too well intentioned to let things be free or something like that. So it's important. I may get around to it someday. And a related book to that, which I found on the same day, The Bonapartes, a 200-year biography of a family by David Stackton. If I ever need to know more about France, I now have 2 books on it. I think I've got a few more, and then general histories of stuff. But on France itself, a person ought to have a small library on France, right? 5, 10 books. Copyright 1966. Okay, so 1870s, 80s, 1966. About an event in the 1790s. You can't probably get much more up to date than that unless some documents have been discovered or something. And even that wouldn't change much. Vasari's Lives of the Artists. Now, I shipped this from my Connecticut home to Utah when I moved there, and it never made it. But it's remained in the back of my mind. And when I saw it for $1, a damn dollar, had to have that. There's a tidbit in there about when this guy's painting the Sistine Chapels, Michelangelo. Someone complains that the bishop of the church or whatever complains that he's just sitting there sometimes. For days sometimes he sits and does nothing. Hours and hours on end he just sits in a chair and stares. King calls Michelangelo to court and says, "What's going on?" Michelangelo says, "Well, a great person like you knows that it takes leisure time to create things. And that it's not just like manual labor where you just don't do it unthinkingly. If it takes creativity, then it takes time and leisure." The king was like, yeah, that's true. Yeah, okay. So Michelangelo goes back to his work, and he ends up putting that bishop's portrait in as Judas the traitor, the guy who traded on Jesus. So that's both funny, and it's an appreciation of leisure, right? And I'm going to do a video again soon about it, even though I did one in the past. I'm going to do a one-off video, 10 minutes or something. But anyways, there we go. Vasari's Lives of the Artists. Published in the 1700s, I think, or at least the 1800s. Okay, the next one, Hellenistic Culture, Fusion and Diffusion by Moses Haddis. I don't know if it's going to be any good. Published 1959. It might be pretty good. But what I was afraid of was that it looks to be pretty academic. And if it's from an academia point of view, it's a hit or miss. The War for Independence by Howard Peckham, A Military History. The War for Independence, A Military History. It's one thing to have a book about the War for Independence, but a book about the military aspect of it, right here. Quotes, this should be a good book. University of Chicago Press. We all know about the University of Chicago Press. Published 1958. Quotes Pericles in the beginning overleaf. Their virtues shall not only be celebrated by inscriptions on stone in their own country, but abide in the memory of other men in all lands. From Pericles' funeral oration over the Athenian warriors, as reported by Thucydides. Now, that is the case with Jefferson's Declaration of Independence today. It is reissued almost every year since 1776. Almost any government, when some break-off group starts raising hell, they issue the Declaration of Independence from Thomas Jefferson, and then they go to war. So, interesting. That should be good. The military history. That should be good. This next one won't be any good. The Illusion of Power. Political theater in the English Renaissance. Political theater. Now, it literally means theater of the political type, not the political theater, meaning the theater in Europe and politics in Europe, which is what I thought it meant. And if I would have been a little more judicious in looking through the book and finding out what was in it, I wouldn't have purchased it probably. But for $1, now I have a pretty good little history of theater in front of kings and stuff. In fact, I read a couple pages in it before I realized this is a book by people who are interested in plays, about people who performed plays. And it's well written and full of little tidbits, but once I realized they're not getting on to the political theater of Europe, I was upset. The Ancient Mediterranean by Michael Grant. I have a copy in Utah. Michael Grant has written about the Greeks and Romans. He's a populist author, but he probably does more to spread knowledge about the ancient world than most of the academicians in the world put together. The Coming War with Japan by George Friedman and Meredith Liebart. I thought, we'll see what they have to say. Sounds pretty silly. And indeed, it was published right after the fall of the wall, 1991 or 92, 1991. And it is just like they're not imaginative enough to figure out what's going to happen now that communism's gone. And they think, oh, well, Japan will become resurgent. Who says they've calmed down? Right? And they did not even see Islam peering over the edge of history at them. All right, next. The Education of Henry Adams by himself, volumes 1 and 2. I purchased volume 1 or 2 some time ago, but I didn't know which one it was, and I found these both side by side at the bookstore, so I got them both. I thought if I get one, then that'll be the one I have at home. So I got them both. This one's terrible. Identity and Violence, the Illusion of Destiny. That some people identify themselves with violent acts, or they commit violence because of their identity or in defense of their identity, and that this is an illusion and it doesn't lead to success in history. So this is just about why we should not be violent against Islam and the East, by Amartya Sen, winner of the Nobel Prize. Brilliant, brilliant. You can guess what she's like or he's like. A Guide to the Elements by Albert Schwertka. Oh man, I had to have this. There are a lot of science books they have there, but this one is pretty brilliant because it's got like 1 or 2 pages on each and every element. Now, the best way to teach the information is historically. How did the information come about? Where did it come from? Through what observations of reality did we learn about this, that, and the other? But to have on hand just a quick reference to any given element, like I just want to read real quick about beryllium. Now, that's fine that I've got the internet. But for $1, I wouldn't pay much more than that. But for $1, this is brilliant to sit and look through someday. And I could go through and look up every element and read the wiki on it. Yeah, I could do that. So I've got a book to do that if the internet's down someday. Maybe. A New Kind of Science, Explorer. Stephen Wolfram's A New Kind of Science, I'm sure you're familiar with. If not, check it out. I have a video on it. Google his name, watch his videos. A New Kind of Science is a brilliant book, which is basically about the fact that randomness and accidentalness can lead to complexity that we might not have expected in the past. This is a CD-ROM for doing the experiments he did that made him realize the stuff that he realized, that made him write the book that he wrote. But it doesn't work on my new Macintosh. I'm going to try it on my roommate's laptop someday. The Plays of Henrik Ibsen. It's got 5 of them. Ghosts, Dollhouse, Enemy of the People, The Master Builder. I've got quite a few copies of him. He's a good playwright. If you've never read him or don't know about him, you should read some of his plays, particularly Enemy of the People. Very good play. Boswell's Life of Samuel Johnson, selected and abridged by Edmund Fuller. Don't know about the life of Samuel Johnson. Just got another book about him a couple months ago, month and a half or so ago. Samuel Johnson, I need to know more about him. What do you know about him? Aeschylus, the Orestian Trilogy. Agamemnon, Thesuphoriazusai, or Therori, whatever the other one is. Price tag's covering up. That's in poor taste. A price tag ought to be put somewhere else. See, I'm going to possibly laminate